Well, I thank everybody for coming today, and before we get started, I'll talk a little bit about myself. I'm 15 years old. Everybody asks me if I play basketball. I don't. So we'll get that out of the way. I started this a year ago, around this week, around a year ago, and I just really got interested in this project, and the 10 months of long, hard research got me here today. It's going to start as a 25-page book, about a half a sheet of paper folded in half. And obviously it's 75 pages and full sheets of paper. Just everything grew over the 10 months. So I also collect local postcards and just other pieces of history. So this is, if I tell anybody where Glen White is, I'm sure everybody in this room knows where this place is. If you don't, you'll probably find out. So, 2 miles beyond the world-famous Horseshoe Curve, which opened February 15th, 1854, around the same time, Brian and Mary Kelly were the first Glen Whiters, and they settled here. They came here from Ireland during the potato famine. They lived in Tyrone, Ireland, and they settled in Tyrone, Pennsylvania. Now, the reason they came from Tyrone, Pennsylvania to Glen White, they called the first Glen Whiters, is because Brian Kelly won a horse in a raffle that was taking place in the Bald Eagle Valley. And he really didn't need a horse, so he traded it for this. I don't know if you could see that. That's 20 acres of land in the area of Glen White today. And the thing that came with this 20 acres is that no coal or no saloons were to be built on these 20 acres. So, like I said, they came here about the time of the Horseshoe Curve being built, and they lived there. They had a farm, they had cows, pigs, sheep, and they lived there for a good while. And during their time they lived there, a railroad was built off of the Horseshoe Curve to the use of the sawmill, and they were going to log the whole area behind the Horseshoe Curve to produce some funds. And so that's why they started the Glen White Railroad back that hollow. Now, at the time, there was no coal mines back there. It was just only a sawmill for a short period of time, and neighboring Bennington had great quality coal, so they figured if there's good coal here at Bennington, there should be good coal just a few miles away in Glen White. They didn't call it Glen White then, but eventually the coal rights of the land that surrounded those 20 acres that the Kellys had, the purchasers' last names was Glen and White, making Glen White, Pennsylvania. That's a common question when it comes to what's the reason behind the name of Glen White. So that's how things started there. The head of the mining operation was Jacob Taylor of Baltimore. Now, he came here from Baltimore in the early 1870s, and he started the Glen White coal operation, and it grew to quite a big operation. And the Taylor and McCoy firm was born in the 1880s when David McCoy, who was a resident of Hollidaysburg, driving canal boats, and after the canal system shut down after the opening of the Horseshoe Curve, he moved to Bennington, started working there. And then when Glen White opened, he moved to Glen White and worked his way through the company, making him superintendent of the mines. And Taylor liked him so much that they started the Taylor and McCoy firm that later opened mines all around the Glen White area in Glitzen and a few other places. So they founded the Glen White Coal and Lumber Company. Lumber was still a part of the company until it was completely phased out a couple years later, and they were just mainly a coal mining area. So these are some mining tools that they used up there, the picks and shovels, the carbide lamps, and I got the opportunity to get a coal auger that was actually used in the mines of Glen White, and a couple carbide lights that I bought in the surrounding area. And this is what the everyday miner used in the mines there at Glen White. We'll try to pull this up a little bit. There we go. Okay. So, build it and they will come. So you gotta, if you're gonna have a mining community, you gotta advertise it pretty good. So it started with company housing. They built about 25 homes, and they built a school, they built a church, and they built 100 coke ovens. Now, a lot of people ask, what are coke ovens? And the things you see today in the bank, if you go up the Horseshoe Curve Road, past the Horseshoe Curve, in the wintertime you see this, the coke ovens in the bank there. And that's what really got me going on this. I asked my pap, what's that wall over there with a bunch of holes in it? And this is what it looks like today. They place coal from the mines in Glen White in these, and they burn coal to a certain degree. And it was then taken out and loaded in the cars and taken to the Horseshoe Curve for it to be used in the Pittsburgh and Johnstown steel mills, because the coke product burned many hundreds of degrees hotter than coal, because the coke ovens made all the unnecessary minerals like water and carbon phase out of the coal, and made it burn a lot hotter. So these pictures are taken 98 years apart in the same exact spot. So you can see what nature has done to these since they completely shut down in the early 40s. So this long structure in the left here, this building right here, that's a coal tipple. And the coal tipple, they would take the train full of coal, they would back the train cars into this thing. They would actually tip the cars. It would come down into these two little chutes right here that would go into the big cars down here. Then from there, it would be taken to the Horseshoe Curve. And by rail, that's a pretty long ways from the tipple here down by rail to here. And right about here is where they loaded coal onto the main line from the Glen White coal mines. So the tipple from the mine at Glen White was about 1 mile and 1,600 feet by rail. Now from the tipple to the Horseshoe Curve tipple was about 2 miles. And the Horseshoe Curve tipple was a different setup compared to the Glen White coal tipple. They actually had a track go above the main line. Things drop down out and dump into the bigger cars on the main line, so it could be exported all across the state and the East Coast for many uses. So this was a standard Glen White home. The person who lived in these, the Harilla and Kellys, lived in this house, and the son of the person who lived here is actually in attendance with us tonight. So this is so two families lived in each of these homes, and they split it. So who you were living with, you basically had to deal with. This was house number 5, and they were split in half right about here. Like this was your porch, this was your other family's porch. This here's an outhouse that were built in the 30s by the WPA. There were concrete foundations, and most of them had accommodations for adults and children. Now, this right here, this building, is the company's store. They named it the Taylor Trading Company after Jacob Taylor, the man who started it all. And the car, right here, belonged to Gus Helsing. He was the store operator for about 35 years, and he lived right across the road from the store. So the store was located, if you're going up Horseshoe Curve Road, about 2 miles. There's the second bridge. Then there's a green gate on the side that says no trespassing. And there's a cleared area where the water authority put in. That store sat on the right side of that clearing with the door facing uphill. The foundation is still there. So, like I said, they built a church and school right next to each other. And I got this photo off of the Ekenlaw family. And the church was, I believe, Catholic. It was Methodist. I think it was just about every religion in the book. It just depended on who lived there at one time. So you can see that there were 2 outhouses that came off the back of the school. And Glen White actually had public sewage, which amazes a lot of people. There was a boarding house to the right of the church and school, and it started there and came to an L, and it went like this, and they had a pipe come off of the pipe underground that went into each of these outhouses for the boys and girls in the school. The school closed in 1937. This is when this picture was taken. It's hard to believe that in 1900 there were 44 grade schools in Logan Township. So that, I think we had 8 in Logan Altoona School District now, but this closed in 1937, and all the residents of Glen White went to Edison School afterwards. And this picture was taken as the dismantling of the school began. So right behind this church and school, my pap found these in January. There are 3 people buried at Glen White. We spotted these out, the 2 out on the left in January, and we sent a message to Jim Snyder, and we said, we believe we just found 2 people buried here. And about a month later, he came and doused these graves, which is an amazing process. You can take 2 metal coat hangers, bend them in the shape of an L, and when walking over a grave, if you walk over it, if you're standing on top of a grave, they'll cross, holding them lightly in your hands. Now, if you hold there's a thing, if you hold a necklace over a pregnant woman's wrist, it'll spin one way if it's a man, and it'll spin another way if it's a woman. That's the same way we use this. So we have found that there's 2 men, 1 woman here, and from just 2 metal coat hangers, it'll tell you which way they're facing, if they're an adult or a child, and what gender they are. If you take 1 metal coat hangers or dowsing rods, if you hold it like this, after you use the spin thing, it'll point to the head if it's a man, feet if it's a man, head if it's a woman. So we identified the 2 men, and this is in relation to each other. These 2 had headstones and stones to about the waist. The other man that is buried about 8 feet from the other 2 was only had stones at his feet, and we gave him a headstone and put some rocks down to the waist like the other 2 were. So, like I said, we identified the 2 men. One we just discovered just 2 weeks ago, right over there. The first man that we found out, we have the death certificate is featured in the book. He died in 1910 of blood poisoning, I believe. He was only 37 and lived at Glen White for about a month and 17 days. And the newest man we found was D'Zuba, and he was 44 years old, and he wasn't real familiar with the area yet. So he walked from Glen White to the Horseshoe Curve and walked the main line from Horseshoe Curve to Glitzen. And he put in a money order to his wife over in Hungary so she could come over here and join him. But on his way home, there was a snowstorm, and he fell over and got cold, and the track walkers found him in the morning. He was completely froze to death. So they loaded him up on a train, took him to Altoona, prepared his body, and sent him back to Glen White. We believe it's the furthest one from the 2 is D'Zuba, who died in 1914, December 15th, 1914. So this is the Glen White engine. The Glen White, this is the bigger engine with Thomas on the left and Ralph on the right, the train operators there. This would be from the 20s to the 40s. They ran the steam engine here. And on the left, you can see the coke ovens. And this building here was the engine house that they kept the big engine in. The smaller engine that was used to go to the tipple to the mines was kept back towards the mines in relation to this. So this is an aerial view of Glen White that was taken in 1938 from an airplane. And so I'm going to go over here and point out some buildings. This would be the church and school right here, next to the boarding house. This would be the bridge where the creek lies, and you can see the new concrete that they poured in the stream there, right behind the store, which is right here. Now there were 3 big homes that were shared between 4 families, and there were 3 bigger homes in here that cannot be seen too good that were a part of the higher up company people like the store owner and the superintendent and the mine foreman. So the mine was back this way. It came across the road, had its own horseshoe curve, go back to the tipple, and inside the tipple were, excuse me, a couple of houses. So, man, that was pretty dark. That was supposed to be an aerial view of what it looks like today. So there are three ponds that the Altoona Water Authority built there in the 80s to clean up the mine drainage that went to the Horseshoe Curve reservoirs below. They put limestone in the bottom of them, and all the sulfur that was in the water would cling to that limestone, and it would go down to the Horseshoe Curve reservoirs for a water supply. So Glen White, it closed up. It wasn't a very quick process. This happened over the course of 4 years. Let's see here. Over the course of 4 years, in 38, the Glen White Coal and Lumber Company was struggling with miners' wages and other debt, so they decided to go into voluntary receivership, and that means whoever wanted the company on all the ground, all the houses, got it. And the people who had the company before got it back, started a new company, and the mines were closed for about 16 months. So the population of Glen White dwindled down. But once they got the mines reopened and the company started back up, the population really picked up again. And the high population in the peak of Glen White was about 250. So now things were going good again, and they took out a loan in 38 to help them from a refinancing agency. And in 1941, over the 3-year course, they did not pay anything on that loan. So the loan company got it. It went to a sheriff's sale, and it was bought by M. Glosser Brothers in Johnstown, and they scrapped the rail, the steam engines, everything. And then it was bought off of them by the Altoona Water Authority, and they told all the people that lived there, you have 1 year to figure out what you're doing, and you have to be out of here. So you can take anything you want, you just got to be out of here. So a lot of the houses that are below the Horseshoe Curve Reservoir, from here to here, a lot of the lumber used in those homes actually were used in Glen White homes and were taken apart, taken down the road, and reconstructed. Not how they looked up there, but just they all followed a similar blueprint. And a lot of the Glen White town residents lived there for a short period of time, and there are still family members of Glen White residents that still live on that Containing Point Road today. So that's how we got to where we are today, and I'm glad to keep the memory of Glen White alive. So if there's any questions. Yes.
Can you explain specifically where it is and what you can see? Like if you're starting at the parking lot for the Horseshoe Curve,
Yep.
and going up towards Blitzen,
Yes.
you're on the right-hand side.
Yep.
And you're saying it's a second bridge?
There's one bridge. Yeah, I can do that. I can do that. When you go up, there's the first bridge right here. There's a sign there that says Glen White Run. Right there. You keep going, and this road takes a real sharp curve. And the coke ovens start here. And there's a spring that comes down out of what we call Bulgarian's Hollow right there. And there was an old man. He was the only guy from Bulgaria that lived at Glen White, so that's Bulgarian's Hollow about right in here. So if you look across, there's 2 yellow reflectors where this brick spring is. And if you look across in the fall, through early spring. If you look straight across, that's where the kokums start. And they go from about here to here. And this is where the tipple was. And this I just put on a couple months ago where the Glen White Cemetery was. So if you want to go up there and check it out, there's steps that we put in the bank so you can go up there and look.
So that's on the left of the road.
Yes. The church, the school, the boarding house, and 6 homes were on the left side of the road going up. On the right side of the road, there was the store, the engine house, the tipple, the coke ovens, and more homes. And they actually had a ball field way up in this area. And there's a bike path parking lot up here. I'm not sure where all it is, but it goes all through here. So this is basically the Glen White area. So the Galls, who own the Samurai shops over here, they live right here. This is where they started out. Their foundation's still there, and they would have family reunions. They would have family reunions, and they would visit the old foundation of their grandparents and great grandparents. So I got to talk to a man who lived at this home for about 15, 20 years, Lino DeGaulle and Sam DeGaulle, who are 94 and 96. And here's the thing, I did this when I did because if somebody were to write a book about Glen White 30 years from now, I don't think any town residents that would remember anything would be living.
No.
So if you find information about Glen White in a book, it's going to be different from what you're going to get out of a person. You're going to get from town residents, you're going to get stories from Glen White that you're not going to find in a book. And that's why I talked to as many people as I could, what they remembered and everything. That just shut off.
There's no, you have to cross the creek to get to the coke ovens though, right?
Right.
There's no easy access.
So, last month, the Water Authority sent me an email, and they said that recreation ideas are becoming a thing for a lot of the watershed properties around. So they asked me to draw up a plan of what they want me, what an idea of like a recreational park at Glen White in the future. So
Might be a way over. Yeah.
eventually there could be a very accessible way to Glen White if things can come through. But something, hopefully it gets done in the future.
What about the mine itself? You used to be able to go back that road, do you remember, to the, because I went back there years ago.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it was just, it was dangerous,
Yeah,
really,
it
at that
was.
time. So what do they do with it lately?
I believe that since they put the watersheds in and
Oh, the watersheds was in when it was still in there.
I think since they did all that, they kind of closed it up and bulldozed it down so people can't just like walk in. I know where a majority of the mines were. I have an idea, but I didn't want to put in my book because I don't want people going back there and just looking for it, getting trapped in there, and then it comes back on me.
In relation, the schooling, in relation to what they call the air shaft, that's the
Yes.
steep part that was the wall.
Yes.
That you could step over, that was the air shaft. And literally, that still comes up. That's
Yep,
all
the
that-
sulfur bubbles out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Where was that, the schools in relation to that?
Across the road, about a half mile from that, on the left side.
On the left side?
So there's a cement bridge there. If you're going up, one end's over here, one end's over here. It's kind of like on a diagonal. So if you're standing there on this side, the guard fence comes in, and there's a set of steps. When you walk over to the graves, you walk through the church and you walk through the school, or where they were. So the church and school were so close to the bank, I don't have any pictures of the front of the church or school, because there's only a small little walking path in front of it.
So if you go up, don't go across the bridge. There's some area on the right-hand side you can pull off and park. Don't go across the bridge. Walk across the road, and you'll see a stump laying there at the end of the guard fence off of the bridge. And there's a couple little, I cut off of that stump and made wooden steps just so I could get up the bank. And as soon as you hit the top of it, you're standing in the church.
Well, as soon as you come down from the air shaft, they really changed the road there.
Yeah,
several
well,
years ago.
that timber's cut right next to where these people were buried.
If the logging company would have went 25 more yards, they would have went right over the graves. So it's great that they stopped where they did, because
Do you think that's going to be the graves that's there?
I believe
As long as it's in existence?
I talked to the many town residents who were 94 and 96, and they didn't even know of these three graves, and they were just amazed that they were there. So through newspaper clippings, and a lot of the Glen White residents were buried in Altoona, Coupon, Glitson, Tunnel Hill. So I don't think they were buried in Glen White. If they lived there just a short time and didn't have very much money, that's all they could do.
And we dowsed, we made circles around the three graves
Yep.
to see if there was any more graves, and there's only three.
Yep.
And one of the clippings that we came across was, it didn't mention the name, but it said basically that so-and-so had not been seen for several days, and probably another person that tripped and fell into the cocoa.
Yeah. This was kind of like the Wild Wild West. You read newspaper clippings of people playing cards and people got stabbed because they were accused of cheating, and people stealing other people's chickens, and just making moonshine and waiting outside the office and exchanging moonshine for company wages, and it was just something. I mean, if you go back 100 years ago and just sit there and just look around, it was all clear, it was all open, and you could just see that little engine just chugging up through the mountains, and it would just be something to see. But just poor management got it to where it is today.
One guy threw something on the rails and
It would just be something to see. But just poor management got it to where it is today.
one guy threw something on the rails and derailed the train.
Yeah, people got mad at the mine boss, and they went and stole a mine prop, threw it in front of the train and derailed the train, and then cops came up there and arrested them. There was a kid getting water out of the stream, and he thought he was a groundhog, and he shot him 3 times in the head.
Whoa!
He was 15, my age, getting water out of the stream. How can you mistake a 15-year-old for a groundhog? It just beats me. But
Who's getting a big groundhog?
The kids are
and there was
A
some.
lot of well-known names yet. The Gauls came from
Yes.
Glen White. There's Weavers, Lynches.
Yep.
My checking yours probably on.
My grandma taught there.
Yeah.
My grandma taught it.
Are there no foundations like at Bennington you can go and there's all these foundations?
So there's a foundation of the Econlog homestead on the left-hand side going up. Other than that, a lot of the home foundations were bulldozed to put those ponds in. So other than that,
But there's that cement thing that's there at the corner of the...
yes, that was an outhouse.
Okay, so that's still there.
They hit the corner of that when they were making that clearing. It was all scraped up. That was an outhouse there for that house I had a picture on over there. That's that white building there.
Again, before you walked the wall before there, you went down into the left of the foundations. That's the store and stuff down in there
If you're going down,
as you're going up.
you're going up on the
Yeah,
left.
right before you start up the air shaft. The steep
There's a big rectangle there.
Yes.
That was a double outhouse. It was a split down the middle, one for adults and one for children.
My husband's stepfather, I mean, he was 100 years old, died years and years ago, but he delivered stuff to some type of a store down here.
Yeah, that was the Taylor Trading Company on the
I
left, on
don't
the
think
right
that's
side.
big
Going
enough for a store.
up. So they didn't make much up there. I think they paid it with actual money rather than script. They had to pay rent, and you spent your money at the company store, and you didn't make much otherwise because 39 weeks only got you $1,000. So that was the highest paid guy in Glen White history, $1,000 for the year. So they didn't make much, that's for sure.
the book has wages in there.
Yeah, the
for
1940
week.
census is in there. It tells you the head of the family, which house they lived in, how much they paid for rent, how much they made the year before, how many people lived at home. So it gives, you can get a lot of information out of the census. So, any other questions?
Not only did he interview people, he had over 1,000 newspaper clippings to go through.
Yeah, all came from here.
So
Yeah.
you started out like you were curious about this, and so like as you went and you did your research, like what did you get from all of this, and like long lasting? How do you think it's going to impact your life? I'm just kind of curious.
Well, it's definitely changed my future. That's for sure.
In what way?
It'll look good on a resume. So, writing's definitely something I enjoy. I worked on this for 10 months, and it was worth every second of it. So, the winter's coming again, and it's got to get started on another project. So,
One more thing, down, if you're going down now,
yes.
from Blitzen towards the curve, on the left-hand side, there used to be yellow brick things.
Yeah, that was
a coal tipple.
clay tipple. They mine clay up top of the
Went
mountain.
over the road.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's what that was.
Yep. That was a clay tipple.
That's from my friend worked in the clay mine.
They the students would catch the bus to go to Edison right there at the clay tipple. That's what they would all walk down and catch the bus right there and turn around and head back down.
Who owns the 20-acre plot now?
City. But still, since 1854 till today, there's not been 1 ounce of coal taken out of that 20 acres. They mined right along it. They mined right next to it. Still didn't touch that 20 acres.
How about the Cantaning Trail? Where was that in relationship?
Went right through it. Went right through Glen. The Logan Valley Mall was a campground, and it came where Blair Honda was, and it came across near 58th Street, went up where the reservoirs were, and went right through Glen White, turned, and there were the creek Y's at Glen White. It took the right haul, you would call that, and it went through Elstey to Asheville to Chest Springs, clear to Katanning. It went from Katanning, PA to Shirleysburg, in that little section of it. There's many monuments around the area marking the Katanning Trail.
Thank you.
Is your grandfather here?
Yes, right there.
Where's the inspiration?
Oh, I thought you said father.
They're both over there.
Nice
Yeah.
project, nice project.
What happened to the smarts? Skip a couple generations there.
I said if somebody don't write a book on this history's all gonna be lost.
Nice
Yeah.
project, nice project.
What happened to the smarts? Skip a couple generations there.
I said if somebody don't write a book on this history's all gonna be lost.
I'm curious to see how many people are in attendance tonight actually had relatives that lived in Glen White. Raise your hand if you had relatives from Glen White. A couple people.
I passed it for 52 years daily.
A couple people.
My grandma taught school there.
School teachers were elected back then. They had board meetings, and they said, you're going to teach here, you're going to teach there. And I would like to find out who taught school there each year. So
I figured she was in normal school when she was 15. And they sent her to normal school, then she taught, I figured out she taught there in 1902.
1902.
1902 into that area.
In the book, the preceding,
The guy before her.
yes, 1900 to 1901, that's the earliest known picture of Glen White.
She taught, I know, probably 5 to 10 years in there. Because I kind of we went back through what we were doing when we were, my sister did a lot, my mother did a lot of the research.
Mm-hmm.
And my sister has all the.
What was her name?
School there. What was her name? Annie, her name was Annie Lynch Conrad.
Annie Lynch Conrad.
Thank you.
I think we've seen that Conrad name.
Oh,
The one school teacher got his foot cut off down to the Horseshoe Curve.
Yeah, I'm not sure what his name was.
Off the train.
He was going out to and missed his step on the train and got his foot run over. So,
Years ago, there used to be a lot of names from Blitzen and Coupon that had come from Glen White.
right, it was just the nearest place below the reservoirs and up there, so.
Coupon would be a good thing for you to take up the.
Yeah, yeah, I was just in Coupon today about that.
Coupon got their name because they, again, you're talking another little mining area.
Yep.
And they paid the people with coupons.
Coupons.
Mhm.
And they had to use the coupons to go to the, they got everything from the company store, like all
Right.
their food and everything.
Yep.
And that's how they paid for it, with the coupons. They paid it in coupons and they
That's exactly what it
redeemed them at
was.
the store for good.
Yep.
But it was quite
Those
big at
people,
one time.
it was just survival.
Does anyone have any
Just the
questions
survival.
for Kevin?
Any more questions? I'll be over here selling books. If you want to get a book for $20, I'll sign them. Yep, that's it.
You rent.
Thank you.